Alright, so now we come to Chapter 3 of the Quenta Silmarillion and Chapter 4. I'm going to lump these two together here. So basically what happens next is one day Orome discovers that the elves have awoken. Finally, the firstborn children of men have, or the firstborn children elves have awakened in the far east of the world, beside the waters of Lake Kuivianen. I think I'm saying that right. And what brought this about was Varda had created the stars in the sky. And as soon as the stars came out, the elves awoke. Orome discovered them. But Melkor his evil has grown, and you're getting all these evil monsters and stuff, his evil spirits, especially the Balrogs, are out and about. And the Valar decide that they're going to go to war with Melkor to save the elves, basically. And of course, when Orome first appears to the elves, they're scared of him, they're frightened of him because of Melkor has sent deception down there to him. And so, and those elves that do go outside of the camp basically get taken by him, and he breeds the race of the orcs. So it is thought. There has been some debate about this, and Tolkien did think about this as well. Since Melkor can't create things of his own, he couldn't have created the orcs. So he had to have taken them from something. Would God allow him to torture and mutilate the elves and turn them into these things? And since if they come from elves, do they have eternal life? Are they immortal like them? These are questions he tried to answer, and came up with different things about where they could have come from. But Melkor could not have created them, and it even says here he can only mock what is already there. He can't create real new things of his own. Even Frodo says that in The Lord of the Rings, that the enemy can't create new things of his own. He has to corrupt anything that actually already exists. So where do the orcs come from? Here it says, they're from the elves, but could they be men? And would they come later? These are different things that he had thought about, and these are debates that go on. Are the orcs completely evil? Can they not be saved? Tolkien thought, well, obviously they can be redeemed, just like anything. It does say in here that the orcs do breed and multiply after the manner of humans, so there's got to be female orcs, right? But what's really cool here, before the elves come into being, when it talks about the stars, put in the sky, it gives names for some of these stars and the constellations, which are also mentioned. There's a really great website I used to go to called thecouncilofelrond.com. They have an article on there about this. And Tolkien, I think even here, Christopher Tolkien puts in the index in the back, in the entries for the different names of these stars, what they correspond to in the real world. Obviously, Manel Makar and his shining belt, as it says. Well, obviously, we know there's a constellation that has a shining belt. It's called Orion. So obviously, Manel Makar is the constellation Orion. Alcarinque is a star, which is actually the planet, I believe, Jupiter. And you have stars like Carnil, Luanil. Luanil means blue star, so could that be Neptune? Neynar, Lumbar, Elamire, which I believe it says that that's actually the planet Mercury. Then you have the seven stars, the sickle, which is basically one of the dippers, I believe. A constellation named Wilwardin, which is basically an eagle, which I don't think it says here what that corresponds to. Is there a constellation that corresponds to? I don't quite remember. But yeah, this is all very fascinating stuff that Tolkien tried to make his world like his world is our world, and he tried to make it resemble the real world as much as possible, even though it's a fantasy. But everything in here has to be believable, and he definitely made everything believable. But anyway, they make war on Melkor. He is taken and put in prison for 3 ages. They're in Valinor. And then they have Orome go and convince the elves to come to Valinor with them. And for the first time, the elves are split into 2 groups. Now, the elves were first, they called themselves the Quindi, or those that speak with voices. But the Valar called them the Eldar, or people of the stars. The Eldar, of course, that name is retained for those elves who go on the march to Valinor. Those who don't are the Avari, the Dark Elves. And so the elves, they journey on in 3 groups. You have the Teleri, the Noldor, and the Vanyar. Vanyar and... So they all... Yeah, so these 3 tribes, they have their leaders. Their leaders were taken to Valinor originally. And so they had seen the light of the 2 trees. The Teleri, I believe, are the most numerous of the 3, and they are led by the brothers Elwë and Olwë, which will become important. Elwë especially will become important later. Well, at one point, the elves, they end up coming to what it says is a great forest and a great river. Obviously, those being the Anduin and Greenwood the Great, which become Mirkwood later on. And before them were the Misty Mountains. It says that they were bigger in those days, and that Melkor had reared these to hinder the riding of Orome. And so the elves were afraid to cross these mountains, and so they stayed there for a while. Some turned aside, of the Teleri turned aside, and they became the Nondor, or the Sylvan Elves, that you would later see in Mirkwood and in Lothlorien. And even further south, they would go to what would eventually become Gondor. Okay? And, but eventually, the rest of the Eldar do cross over the Misty Mountains, and Elwë becomes lost. And so in chapter 4, he sees Melian the Maya, and he falls in love with her, and she falls in love with him. And basically, they just stand there, and time passes over them. And as we will see in the next chapter, the Teleri, they are searching for him. Eventually, some give up the search and go to Valinor. Those who stay behind in Beleriand become the Sindar, or Grey Elves, and he eventually comes out of his trance and becomes their king, and they name him Elu Thingol. He's the king of the Sindar, but he's the only one that has actually seen the light of the 2 trees. And from Melian and Thingol would come the fairest elven maiden that ever lived, who will become important later on in the story. And there you have it. That's today's reading. I will continue to bring these every day. So or try to every day. I do have other videos I want to do as well. But that's all for now. Until next time.